Denise slid the envelope across the diner table right between the syrup bottle and my plate of pancakes, like she was asking me to pass the salt. The waitress had just topped off my coffee. The radio behind the counter was playing some old country song I didn't recognize. Denise kept her hand on the paper for a second, red nails flat against the manila, then looked up at me and said, "I think it's time." I looked at the envelope, then at her. 28 years of marriage, and that was how she wanted to do it. Booth by the window at Leland's Diner, the same place we'd been coming every other Thursday since my shop was still small enough to fit 3 tractors at a time. Outside, a gray Kentucky morning hung low over the highway. A feed truck rolled past slow enough to rattle the glass. Inside, everything smelled like bacon grease, coffee, and burnt toast. Familiar, steady, like most of my life had looked from the outside. I opened the envelope and read the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her lawyer's name in neat black print. My name below hers. Wade Mercer, 63 years old, owner of Mercer Farm Equipment Repair. Husband in title only. I turned one page, then another. Denise watched me hard, waiting for something. Maybe anger, maybe pleading, maybe one good loud scene so she could tell herself she'd finally escaped a difficult man. Instead, I folded the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and set it beside my coffee. "All right," I said. That wasn't what she expected. I could see in the way her mouth tightened. "That's it?" she asked. I cut into the pancakes. "Looks pretty official." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't have anything to say?" I took my time chewing. Across the room, Earl Donahue was laughing too loud at something one of the waitresses said. Somebody dropped a fork. The coffee burner hissed. Truth was, I had plenty to say. About the empty years. About the quiet rooms in our house. About the way Denise had started dressing nicer for errands than she ever did for supper with me. About how a marriage can die so slowly nobody bothers burying it. But I wasn't going to hand her the performance. "No," I said, "not much." She leaned back like I'd insulted her. "Wow." I reached for my wallet, laid cash under the check, and stood up. "You should have the house key change when I come by for my things." Her face went blank, and for the first time that morning, she looked unsure. I put on my cap, nodded once, and walked out into the cold before she could stop me. Behind me, through the diner window, Denise was still sitting there with her coffee and her papers, staring at the seat I'd left empty. By noon, both our kids knew that was Denise's style. She never liked carrying a private thing alone if she could turn it into a story first. Erica called me while I was out behind the shop, checking a combine header somebody had dropped off that morning. Wind was cutting across the gravel lot, carrying the smell of diesel and wet dirt. I had my coveralls half zipped and a wrench in one hand when my phone buzzed. "Dad," she said, already upset. "Mom told me what happened." I figured she would. There was a pause. "Are you okay?" I looked across the yard at the bent metal building I'd spent most of my life paying off. The faded Mercer Farm Equipment Repair sign squeaked a little in the wind. Inside, the radio was on low and somebody's old John Deere was leaking hydraulic fluid onto the concrete, same as any other Thursday. "I'm fine," I said. "You don't sound fine." "I sound like I'm at work." She exhaled sharp through her nose. Erica always did that when she was trying not to say something reckless. She said you barely reacted. She said you didn't even care enough to argue. I set the wrench down on the workbench. That what she said? She was crying. "That doesn't make her wrong about crying," I said. "Doesn't make her right about me either." Mason called an hour later, less careful than his sister. "What the hell is going on?" he asked. "Your mother filed for divorce." "And you just took it?" I almost smiled at that. People always think a man is weak if he doesn't throw furniture. "What exactly did you want me to do, Mason? Flip the table at Leland's? Scare the waitress?" "That's not what I mean." I knew it wasn't. What he meant was that grief is supposed to be loud so other people can measure it. But I had been living with the shape of this ending for years. Denise may have served the papers that morning, but the marriage itself had been over in pieces for a long time. It had been over in the quiet suppers eaten in separate rooms, in holidays that felt staged, in her habit of correcting the way I breathed chewed, stood, spoke. In the polished smile she used in public, and the cold silence she saved for home. We had not been husband and wife for years. We had been two people protecting the outline of a thing because it looked respectable from the road. By evening, Denise had told enough people that the story had started settling into town. Poor Denise. Cold Wade. He didn't even fight for her. I locked up the shop at 6, turned off the overhead lights, and stood alone in the dark for a minute, listening to the old building cool. It would have been easy to perform heartbreak. Easier, maybe, than standing still inside it. But I was not going to give Denise one last scene she could use to prove she had been wanted. Some things are too empty to argue over. The papers arrived 3 days later in a thicker envelope, stamped and official. I sat at the small desk in the back of my shop, the one with the burn mark from a welder that slipped 20 years ago, and went through everything line by line. Outside, rain tapped steady on the tin roof. Inside, the air smelled like oil and old paper. Denise had hired someone thorough. She listed the house, her car, the joint accounts, the retirement funds, even the tools she claimed were marital assets, though half of them had grease older than our kids. It was clean, organized, confident. That was the part that caught my attention. Confident people stopped double-checking. I kept reading. Page after page, neat divisions, percentages, expectations. She was asking for what she believed was fair, maybe even generous, in her mind. Enough to walk away comfortable, enough to tell people she hadn't been unreasonable. I reached the last page, then flipped back to the beginning and read it again. Slow this time. Careful. That's when I noticed what wasn't there. No mention of the vending route. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the rain, and let that sit for a minute. 15 years ago, when the shop first started doing well, I had bought a small vending route off a man retiring outside Bowling Green. Nothing big. A handful of machines in feed stores, a tire shop, one hospital waiting room, snack machines, soda, quiet money. A few years later, when things got tighter and we needed to expand the repair side, I told Denise I'd sold it off with some other small assets, cleaned up the books, simplified things. That wasn't entirely a lie. I had sold part of it, but I kept the core machines, the ones that made steady cash and didn't require much attention. I moved them under a separate account, one Denise never asked about and I never offered, not out of secrecy back then, out of habit. A man who runs a small business learns early to keep something set aside for slow seasons, for broken equipment, for things you can't predict. Turns out, sometimes that includes your own life. I pulled open the bottom drawer and took out an old folder, edges worn soft. Inside were statements, deposit slips, maintenance logs. Nothing flashy, just quiet numbers adding up over years. Enough not to impress anyone, but enough to disappear without asking permission. I closed the folder and set it on the desk. Denise thought she had accounted for everything, thought she knew the full shape of what we had built and what she was walking away with. She didn't. And for the first time since that morning at the diner, I felt something shift. Not anger, not even satisfaction, just clarity. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a long time. "Yeah," I said when the man answered. "It's Wade Mercer. I need a current valuation on a vending route." I looked back at the papers spread across the desk. Denise had already decided how my life was supposed to look after she left. She just didn't realize I wasn't planning on staying where she left me. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Erica, not Mason, definitely not Denise. For the next 2 weeks, I handled everything the same way I'd handled busted engines and bad seasons. Quiet, steady, one step at a time. I met with a lawyer, signed what needed signing, and let Denise believe I was settling into whatever small, leftover version of life she had already imagined for me. At night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a map. Not Kentucky. Arkansas. I'd passed through there years ago, hauling a rebuilt transmission for a guy who ran a marina near a lake up north. I remembered the place because it felt still, not empty, just removed, like time moved slower on purpose. That's what I wanted. Not a fresh start with noise and attention, just distance. The listing found me by accident. Or maybe I was looking for it without knowing. Bait shop for sale. Includes small upstairs apartment. Dock access. Needs work. Needs work usually means nobody else wants it, which makes it mine. I drove down alone on a Tuesday before sunrise. Thermos of coffee in the passenger seat. Papers from the divorce folded in the glove box like they were already old news. The road stretched quiet ahead of me, fields giving way to trees, then hills. By the time I reached the lake town, the sky had turned a pale gray blue. The place was worse than the photos. Peeling white paint curled off the siding like old bark. The sign hung crooked, half the letters faded. The dock out back leaned slightly to one side, boards warped and missing nails. A couple of empty slips sat in the water, ropes frayed and drifting. I stood there for a long minute, hands in my jacket pockets, looking at it. Most people would have seen a mistake. I saw something else. No one watching. No one expecting anything. No history attached to the walls. Inside, it smelled like mildew and old bait. Shelves were half empty. A rusted cash register sat on the counter. The stairs creaked when I tested them, leading up to a small apartment with one window overlooking the water. The lake was still, flat like glass. I stepped closer to the window and rested my hand on the frame. For the first time in a long while, there was no noise in my head, no rehearsed conversations, no explanations, no one waiting for me to react the right way, just quiet. The owner met me outside, a tired man ready to be done with the place. "You sure about this?" he asked, glancing at the building like it had personally offended him. I nodded once. Yeah. He named the price. I didn't argue. Some things aren't worth negotiating. We shook hands right there on the uneven gravel, the lake behind us, the shop between us, like something already changing hands before the paperwork even caught up. On the drive back, I didn't turn on the radio. I just thought about the peeling paint, the busted dock, the empty slips, and how easy it would be for everyone back home to think I'd lost my mind. That part didn't bother me. What mattered was this. For the first time, I wasn't fixing something that was already broken. I was choosing what to build next. I locked myself out on the third day. It was early, just after sunrise. The kind of morning where the lake sits low and quiet, mist barely lifting off the surface. I'd stepped outside to check the dock, coffee still warm in my hand. Keys sitting on the counter, where I'd left them without thinking. The door clicked behind me. I stood there for a second, looking at the handle, then at the window, then back at the handle again. Good start, I muttered. The nearest locksmith was 30 miles out, according to a sign I'd seen coming into town. I made the call anyway, expecting to wait half the day. She showed up in 40 minutes. A white utility van pulled into the gravel lot, tires crunching slow. The door slid open, and she stepped out like she'd done it 1,000 times. No hurry, no wasted motion. Jolene Carter, 58 maybe, sun-brown skin, short gray streak hair tucked under a cap, plain work shirt with her name stitched above the pocket. Her eyes moved over the building first. Not me, taking it in. "You the one locked out?" she asked. "Looks that way." She walked up to the door, crouched slightly, studied the lock like it had a personality. "You force it." "No." "Good," she said. "Most people do something stupid before they call me." I watched her work. No wasted tools. No extra movement. She had the door open in less than 2 minutes. "That'll do it," she said, stepping back. I nodded and reached for my wallet. "Appreciate it." She didn't take the money right away. Instead, she glanced past me into the shop, then toward the dock, then up at the apartment window. "You just buy this place?" she asked. "Couple days ago." She let out a small breath through her nose. Not quite a laugh. You either see something nobody else does or you enjoy pain. Maybe both. That got a slight smile out of her. I handed her the cash. She counted it quick, tucked it away, then leaned one shoulder against the doorframe like she wasn't in a rush to leave. "You planning on fixing the dock?" she asked. "Yeah. You'll need new boards, not patches. And those slips." She nodded toward the water. "Rope's gone. You'll lose a boat first storm that rolls through." I figured. She studied me for a second longer than necessary. Not suspicious. Measuring. You from around here? She asked. Kentucky. Far enough. There was a pause. Wind moved across the lake, just enough to ripple the surface. I've got tools, she said finally. And time, depending on the day. You start tearing into this place without knowing what you're doing. You'll waste both. I looked at her, then back at the shop, then at the dock. Most people back home would have offered advice just to hear themselves talk. This wasn't that. What do you charge? I asked. She shrugged. Depends how much you listen. That almost made me smile. Fair enough, I said. She pushed off the doorframe, heading back toward her van, then stopped and looked over her shoulder. Name's Jolene, she said. Wade. She nodded once. All right, Wade. Don't touch that dock till I come back tomorrow. Then she got in the van and drove off, leaving gravel settling behind her. I stood there a moment, keys in my hand now. Door open behind me, lake out front. 3 days in, and already something unexpected had shown up. Not loud, not dramatic, just useful. And for the first time since I had bought the place, I had the feeling I wasn't going to be rebuilding it alone. The rumor reached her before the paperwork was finalized. Small towns don't wait for facts. They build stories out of fragments and pass them around like coffee. I heard about it from Mason first. She'd been calling people. He said over the phone, voice tight, saying you disappeared, that you just packed up and ran off without saying anything. I didn't run, I said. I left. That's not how she's telling it. I was sitting on the dock with a bucket of nails beside me, Jolene knee-deep in the water, steadying a new board while I lined it up. The sun was high, burning off the last of the morning haze, though it smelled fresh where we'd cut it. What else is she saying? I asked. He hesitated. That you're living with some woman down there. I glanced at Jolene. She didn't look up, just held the board in place like she hadn't heard a word. Not exactly, I said. Well, that's how it's spreading, Mason replied. And now people are talking about how you moved on fast. I drove the nail in clean. One hit, then another. That's fine, I said. It's not fine, he snapped. She's making you look like the bad guy. I leaned back on my heels, wiping my hands on a rag. Mason, people will believe whatever version makes the most sense to them. I'm not going back there to correct it. He went quiet. Have you talked to her? He asked after a second. No, she's not taking it well. That part didn't surprise me. Denise had expected a certain outcome. Me staying in town. Me shrinking into a smaller version of myself. Me being available, either as a regret or a reminder that she'd been right to leave. Instead, I was gone. And worse than that, I wasn't struggling. Word had already started leaking about the shop. Fishermen stopping in. Cold drinks stocked. Live bait back in the tanks. A couple of boat slips repaired and rented out by the week. Nothing big, just steady. That's what unsettled her. Not that I'd left, that I'd built something that didn't include her. A few days later, Erica called. She's angry, she said quietly. Like, really angry. Not sad, not regretful, just mad. At me? At everything. Erica said, but mostly you. I stepped inside the shop, the bell over the door giving a soft ring. The place looked different now. Cleaner, organized, alive in a way it hadn't been when I bought it. Jolene walked in a minute later, setting a toolbox on the counter. You look like someone just told you a story you don't care about, she said. Something like that. She studied me for a second. Ex-wife? Yeah. She nodded like that explained everything. Let me guess, she said, pulling on her gloves. You were supposed to fall apart. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. She smirked slightly. They always hate it when you don't follow the script. Outside, the lake moved slow under the afternoon sun. Inside, the shop hummed with quiet work. Back in Kentucky, Denise was telling a story about a man who couldn't hold his life together. Down here, I was too busy building a new one to argue about it. Mason showed up unannounced on a Friday afternoon. I heard his truck before I saw it. Engine too loud for this quiet stretch of road. It rolled into gravel lot, like it had something to prove. Tires kicking dust up against the side of the shop. Jolene glanced out the window. Yours? Yeah, I said. Mason stepped out already tense, jaw tight, eyes scanning the place like he was looking for confirmation of something he'd already decided. He saw Jolene first. That didn't help. "So it's true," he said, walking up to me. "You just moved down here and started over with someone else?" Jolene didn't react, just leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, watching in the same way she watched everything, calm, assessing. I wiped my hands on a rag. "You drove 4 hours for that question?" "I drove 4 hours because Mom's losing it," he shot back. "And because I didn't believe what she was saying until I saw it." "What exactly did she tell you?" "That you replaced her," he said. "That you walked out a 28-year marriage like it meant nothing." I held his gaze. "And you believe that?" "I didn't know what to believe," he admitted. "That's why I'm here." There was a pause. Wind pushed lightly against the open door. Somewhere out on the lake, a boat motor hummed low. Jolene stepped forward just enough to set her coffee down on the counter. "You want me to leave?" she asked, not looking at me. "No," I said. Mason noticed that. Took it in. "Look," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "I just need to understand what actually happened." I nodded once. "Then sit down." He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. I didn't rush it. Some things land better when you don't dress them up. "Your mother didn't just decide to leave," I said. "She had somewhere to go." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "She's been planning a move. Arizona." He blinked. "What?" "With a man she met through some travel group," I said. "Been talking to him for a while. Longer than you think." Mason stared at me like I just said something that didn't fit into the version of reality he'd been given. "No," he said slowly. "She would have told us that." "She didn't tell me either," I replied. "I found out before the papers showed up." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Jolene stayed still, letting it settle. Mason leaned back in the chair, running a hand through his hair. "So, this wasn't just her being unhappy." "No," I said. "It was her leaving for something else." He let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was nothing funny in it. "She told us you checked out, that you stopped trying." I looked out toward the lake for a second. The water was steady, unchanged by any of this. "I stopped chasing something that wasn't there anymore," I said. "That sat with him. You could see it shifting things around in his head. Rearranging the story, he'd been handed into something closer to the truth." "And her?" he asked quietly. I shrugged. "She made her choice." Mason nodded slowly, eyes unfocused for a moment. Then he looked around the shop. The shelves, the tools, the open door leading to the dock. "This place," he said. "You built this already?" "Still building it." He glanced at Jolene again, but this time different. Less judgment, more understanding. "Mom said you ran away," he muttered. I shook my head. "No." I looked at him, steady. "I just didn't follow her. She showed up on a Sunday. No call, no warning. Just a car pulling into the gravel lot slow enough that I noticed it through the front window before I recognized it. Same silver SUV. Clean, polished, like it had never left the driveway back home. I was behind the counter, counting out change for a fisherman. Jolene was out back, working on one of the slips. The bell over the door rang, and I didn't need to turn around and know it was her. Denise always wore the same perfume. It carried into the room before her voice did. "Wade." I finished the transaction first. Handed the man his receipt, nodded, watched him leave. No rush, no scene. Then I turned. She looked different. Not older, not worn down, just misplaced. Like someone standing in the wrong version of their own life. Her clothes were too sharp for this place. Her posture too controlled. But her eyes, those didn't have the same certainty they used to. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She took a step closer, glancing around the shop like she was trying to understand it. "This is where you've been." "Yeah." "This?" she said, almost under her breath. I didn't answer that. She set her purse down on the counter like she planned to stay a while. I tried calling. "I know." "You didn't answer." I wasn't interested in the conversation. That landed harder than anything louder would have. She swallowed, then straightened slightly, like she was putting herself back together mid-sentence. "Things didn't work out." I waited. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. Arizona didn't happen. And him, she paused. That ended. Of course it did. I didn't say it. You could have told me, she added, almost offensive now. You just disappeared. I left, I said calmly. You knew I would. That's not the same thing, she snapped. You didn't fight for anything. There was again the script she needed me to follow. I stepped out from behind the counter, slow, measured. Denise, I said, you had already decided to go. Her jaw tightened. I was confused. No, I said, you were certain enough to file papers and plan to move across the country. Silence. Outside, I heard Jolene's boots on the dock, steady against the wood. Denise glanced toward the sound, then back at me. Is she the reason? She asked. No. She's living here with you? She works here, I said. Helps me fix what was broken. Denise let out a small, sharp laugh. So you replaced me with this? I didn't react. That bothered her more than anything. I came here to talk, she said, voice tightening, to figure out if we made a mistake. I held her gaze. No, I said, just that. No anger. No hesitation. She blinked. That's it. That's it. Her voice dropped. We're too old for this, Wade. We don't start over at this age. We fix things. I shook my head slightly. You already broke it. That doesn't mean it's gone, she insisted. We had a life. I glanced around the shop, then passed her toward the lake. I have a life, I said. That was the moment it hit her, not the words. The certainty behind them. Her shoulders dropped just slightly, not dramatic, just enough to show something inside her had shifted. You're serious, she said quietly. I always was. She stood there a second longer, like she was waiting for something to change, for me to soften, for the past to pull harder than the present. It didn't. Outside, Jolene stepped into view, wiping her hands on a rag, pausing when she saw Denise. Denise noticed her, looked between us, then back at me. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she said. I nodded once. I know. The storm rolled in fast. Late, weather doesn't ask permission. 1 minute it's flat and quiet. Next minute the sky drops low and the wind starts pushing like it's got somewhere to be. By dusk, the water had turned dark and restless. Boats that had been sitting calm all afternoon were knocking against their slips, ropes straining, wood creaking under pressure. I was already outside before the first real crack of thunder hit. Jolene stepped out behind me, pulling on her jacket. We should have tied those north slips tighter earlier, she said. We've got time, I replied. She looked at the sky, then back at me. Not much. Rain started as a mist, then turned sharp, the kind that hit sideways. I moved down the dock, checking lines, tightening knots, adjusting where I could. The boards we'd replaced held firm, but the older sections groaned under the weight. The wind picked up harder. A boat near the end jerked loose on one side, slamming against the dock with a hollow crack. I'll get it, I said. Wade. Jolene started, but I was already moving. I stepped onto the last stretch of dock, rain soaking through my shirt, boots slipping slightly on the wet wood. The rope had come loose from the cleat, whipping against the side. I grabbed it, pulling hard, trying to steady the boat enough to secure it again. That's when it hit. Not pain, not at first, just a sudden, heavy pressure in my chest, like something tightening from the inside. My vision narrowed slightly, edges going dim. The sound of the storm dulled, like it had been pushed farther away. I held onto the rope anyway. Finished the knot. Habit, routine, get the job done first. Then my grip slipped. My knee hit the wood harder than it should have. I caught myself on one hand, breath coming shorter than normal. The dock tilted just enough to make it feel like the world had shifted a few degrees off-center. Wade. Jolene's voice cut through everything. Closer now. Too close for where she had been. I tried to stand. Didn't quite make it. My hand slid again, this time closer to the edge. The water below moved dark and fast, waves slapping against the wood. For a second, I thought about how easy it would be to just go over. No noise, no fight, just gone. Then something grabbed the back of my jacket, hard enough to pull me backward. Jolene. She dropped to one knee beside me, one hand locked on me, the other braced against the dock. "Stay with me," she said, voice sharp, controlled. Not panic. Command. "I'm fine," I muttered. "You're not," she said. "Don't argue with me right now." I didn't have the energy to. She shifted, pulling me farther from the edge, forcing me to sit back against the dock support. Rain hit both of us hard now, soaking everything. "Look at me," she said. I did. Her eyes didn't move. Locked in. Focused. "When did it start?" she asked. "A minute ago." "Chest." I nodded once. She exhaled slowly, already reaching for her phone. "Ambulance is coming." "That's not necessary." "It is," she said flatly. No room for debate. She stayed right there with me, one hand still on my shoulder, like letting go wasn't an option she was considering. The storm kept building around us. Wind louder, water rougher. But none of that felt as immediate as the way my body had decided to stop cooperating. Time stretched. Then lights cut through the rain from the road above. Red. Flashing. Jolene didn't move until they were close enough to take over. Even then, her hand stayed there a second longer than it needed to, just enough to make sure I wasn't going anywhere. They kept me overnight. High blood pressure, they said. Stress. Age catching up in ways I hadn't been paying attention to. The doctor used careful words, but the meaning was simple. Slow down, or something worse will do it for you. Jolene stayed. Didn't make a show of it. Didn't hover. Just sat in the chair by the window, arms crossed most of the time, eyes half on me, half on nothing in particular, like she was keeping watch without needing to announce it. At one point, I woke up in the middle of the night. The room was quiet, machines humming low. She hadn't moved. "You don't have to stay," I said. She didn't look at me. "I know." That was enough. When they discharged me the next day, she drove me back. No music in the truck, just the road, the trees, the lake coming back into view like it had been waiting. The shop looked the same. But I didn't. For the first time, I noticed what I'd been ignoring. The long days, the skipped meals, the way I pushed through things instead of around them, fixing everything except the one thing I lived in. That changed. Not all at once, but steady. We adjusted the work, took on what made sense, let go of what didn't, turned the shop into something more than bait and patchboards, repairs, rentals, small engine work, boat motors. It grew, quiet at first, then steady. People came back, then they brought others. Slips filled, the cooler stayed stocked. The register stopped collecting dust and started counting something real. Jolene stayed too, not because we said anything about it, because it made sense. We worked side by side, ate when we remembered, argued sometimes short, direct, over things that mattered, never about things that didn't. One evening, months later, we sat on the dock after closing, sun dropping low, water calm again. "You're different," she said. "Yeah, took a storm to do it. Seems that way." She nodded once, like that was all that needed saying. The letter came a year after that, handwritten, from a name I recognized, an older customer from back in Kentucky, a man whose tractors I'd kept running longer than they had any right to. He'd passed. No family left, but he'd left instructions. A parcel of shoreline land, small but clean, usable, transferred in my name. Said in the letter it was for the man who fixed things without making noise about it. I read it twice, then folded it and set it down. Jolene looked at me. "Good news?" "Yeah," I said. Something like that. We expanded after that. More slips, better dock, storage, enough space to turn the place into something solid, something that would last longer than the man running it. Years passed. Not fast, not slow, just right. One evening, I stood alone on the dock, same as that first week, looking out over the lake. The shop lights glowed behind me, voices inside, work waiting for tomorrow. I thought about the diner, the envelope, the version of my life that had ended over pancakes and coffee. Denise had meant to break something that day. She did, just not what she thought. I didn't rebuild the life she left me with. I built the one I should have been living all along, and I did it the same way I'd handled everything else that mattered, quietly, without asking, and without ever going back.